we're going to show you how to make this. Nah, dude. I'll keep what little brains I've got left. Scram. Dude, back off. I'm keeping my brains. Anyway, no. I'm going to measure my head and draw guidelines. So I need height. And width. So I'm just using the calipers. These are very handy because you can try to do it with a tape measure, but it's very difficult. And I'm just kind of splitting the difference and centering the blocks. That can't be. Sometimes stuff looks weird, trust the math. So it's a good idea to double check, make sure you're really there. Then you just kind of round out. Into a kind of an egg shape, basically. And that's the shape I'm going to be working with. However, since there's going to be some thickness to the latex and since there's some shrink, I'm going to go out and give this thing about a 1/4 inch all the way around. You know, rubber moves and bends a little, so you don't have to be super perfect, but having a little allowance. And so that outer line, that's going to be what I'm going to sculpt to. I'm going to try to keep the clay within that outer line. And this is going to be pretty human based, like a, you know, newly rotted within a couple weeks. So now I'm going to use a little tool with the teeth around the edge, and this is just to shape it. And, you know, just think about how your profile works. Your head is basically an egg with the pointy side in front this way, and then an egg with the pointy side on the bottom this way. So just kind of think of that as you sculpt. And so it gets smaller as you go down the bottom of the face. There's also a certain roundness this way. So, you know, you'll need to allow for that and so that it'll fit your face later on. There's still some caliper measurements we're gonna do here in a minute. Okay. So I'm taking now this hard right angle and I'm finding that line. Make sure I haven't see, as I cut in, I can see it. And I've gone over a little bit here and there. Now I'm going to do some additional caliper measurements, and this is to figure out eye placement and breathing and so forth, and nose and so forth. So I'm going to start my estimate, the back of the head here, and try to come down. I'll just do a series of things. So let's start with eyes. Boy, that's hard to believe, isn't it? This is the thing, when you're measuring, you get surprised. But if you just go by what you think, our eyes are generally not trained well enough. So there's something weird here to me. I'm trying to go back as far as this, and then go to right at my pupils. And that's what it's telling me. So I'm going to have to listen to that, even though I don't like it. It seems a little weird. The positioning's weird. But it's, let's see, maybe I'm too far back. No, that's actually worse. All right, so here's my brow. Let's do my start of my nose here. Yep, it's telling me right. Well, that's where it's telling me my eyes are, and that's really, it's bugging me. We're going to go with that for the time being. So if my eyes are here, that means the brow's going to be here. Now this, boy, you got to be careful with this stuff. Make sure your eyes are closed, but you can feel the middles of your eyes, and that's how far apart they are. So I need to get my center line. So I'm going to say we're right about there. And then my eyes are on this line, and they're right about here. So I don't lose that placement. Now, as you go into the look of the thing, you can move around and stuff somewhat, but you're going to want to keep like this mouth. You're going to want to keep that mouth right where it is. The nose could get a little longer, it could shrink back. That's fine, but the mouth is important to keep that line, because we're going to want this to line up with your mouth later on. So this is just kind of a placeholder right now. And this is going to be made so that you can cut it in different ways. You can free up your mouth completely, or we're going to make it so that you can have the rubber mouth, but it talks. We'll get into all of that. But this is going to be a custom design mask to fit your face. And the minute you put it on, it looks great. It's not like, oh, I have to do eye makeup, I have to do this and that, I have to, whatever. It's going to be made to fit you perfectly. So now I'm putting on the brow and cheekbones, and we're going to use those to disguise where it fits against your face. We're going to roll these under, and since you're customizing this, we can do that, where it would be more difficult if it was just a generic mask supposed to be on anybody. Basically what I'm doing is just getting little lumps of clay that are able to be pushed in and connected to the the sculpture. Now, one thing that's kind of important too is to look at the things sideways every so often. I think I'm good. Make sure you've got a natural, you know, because a face tends to go out in the center a little bit. So this line tells me the horizontal line, and this is the vertical line, so I can come back and know right where that point is, so I can dig in a little bit. So now I'm going to start digging down into the eye socket a little bit. You don't want to go too deep because you don't want to have to deal with rubber, you know, poking in the eyes. But part of the technique is where that rubber comes, you know, of what I'm going to show you here, where that rubber comes in. It'll be away from your eyelids and things, so your real eyes show and blend in with the mask pretty seamlessly. But you don't want to go too deep. We've added some clay up here, and so we're going to dig in a little because your eyes do go in, and we want this sculpture to kind of come in and fill them. So just kind of best guess it. This is not something you'll be able to caliper, unfortunately, because you're adding clay out here. But you know how eyes sink in pretty much, and they can't sink in like zombie eyes because you got a real face under there. So the sunken in thing is going to all happen out here. We're going to bring the bones out. So that's there, and then these lines are going to keep you true. So at any point I can go back and, all right, here's my horizontal and here's my vertical. And these two lines are going to help you keep track of where your pupil is, and that's pretty darn important. As you go along with the sculpture, you don't want to lose track of that. Now the nasolabial fold, it goes from the tip of your nose. Usually it doesn't go down like this. We're going to take this down. So it's kind of like a puppet mouth. So we'll be able to cut this away and have it look good, because there's information in the sculpture. It wraps around. If you didn't run this all the way down to the chin, then you'd have a cut line that would be real obvious. And so we're gonna be playing some tricks here with the mask so that it can talk. So right now I'm finding all the positioning and heights and stuff. It doesn't look like much yet. We'll go into detailing here in a second, but I'm just getting some of the bone structure I'm going to want, cheekbones. So it's all about positioning right now, not the look of it. I'm wanting to have the nose collapsed, but I have to allow room for your nose because this got to fit you. So I'm going to have to play a few games with that, and so that I don't go too far in, so there's room for your nose, but you still end up with this you know, like the nose is rotting away sort of look. Okay, so I'm going to go into a little more fine detail, and I can go in a little because, you know, we've added some thickness, but not too much. Most of it's going to have to be built out since this is made to fit your face. So here we go. Also, it's helpful to have reference. And pictures are nice, but to have a skull sitting around in your lab somewhere is very helpful to be able to see anatomy. I'm going to make use of this. So I'm still doing fairly large anatomy and stuff. I'm getting some of the wrinkles and things in. But one of the tricks, and this is why this is going to look better than something you'd buy at the store that wasn't custom fit to your face, is I'm coming in and I'm hooking under. So you're not cutting away, you're cutting after the curve. So you don't see the cut line around these eyes. So it will end, the mask will end, but it'll end under a curve, if that makes sense. That way, when it goes on your face, it's kind of hitting the skin around your eye, and there's no point where it's, I can see where they cut that hole out with the scissors, because you're cutting around a curve. The same sort of principle is going to apply this nasolabial fold. I'm going to cut all the way down, so this can be like a puppet mouth, and we're going to use hair to cover up some of this, but it's going to allow this to be completely cut away, and you won't see it. I'll have a fairly deep groove in there, and so you could leave the mouth on if you want. But that's one of the tricks I'm going to use in order to make this a talking mask in more than one way. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going to keep refining the shapes here, and hopefully it'll start to look like a good monster. So the nose, as I was working on it, I realized it wasn't quite looking right, and then I realized the reason is for the nose to eat away that much, it would be much more rotted and bony, and since you've got your face underneath, it was a disconnect. So I brought back in the nose. I'm going to make it look all kind of rotty and twisted, and then these lips, I'm going to get them wrinkly and bring some more rot into it around different places. And so those, wasn't really counting on either of those two changes, but I do a lot of creating in the sculpture. I start with a rough idea and work it, and that's fine. I mean, if you want to work it out really good in a drawing first, that's fine too, but sometimes it just, the sculpture speaks to you. He whispers to me. I don't know if you heard him, but...
You look like you could use a vacation.
Okay, gotcha. All right, I'll take care of that for you, buddy. So anyway, just feel free to create in the sculpture. You're not bound by anything. You're the creator. You decide, and so that's what I'm doing right now. We're just trying to make a good looking zombie. So I'm taking it all from rough to more finished together, because what I found, and what I think the mistake a lot of people make when they're sculpting, is they'll find something like, oh, those eyes look really good, and they'll spend an hour and a half, and then they get down the road with finishing off some of the other stuff, and they realize their anatomy's wrong. It's like, oh no. And so what happens to most, kind of starting sculptors is they just can't bear to redo it because of the time they put in, and so it ends up being, it's like, it doesn't look right, the anatomy's wrong. So I would encourage you to resist the urge, which is a strong urge, to finish something really good and then move on and finish, you know. So try to work on it all together. That's why I'm skipping all around. I'm working on it, roughing it, tightening up the whole sculpture so that if some point I'm realizing, ooh, that's not right, I can just go, you know. But if I just spent an hour and a half and went, you know, that's rough duty. So that's why. But it's nice because when it starts to come together, it comes together quickly, you know, because you're refining all of it at the same time, and you're getting it tighter and tighter, and then you know what's going on in your brain. For somebody watching, it's like, well, that's rough, but it's all right. Take your time. It's better to go down the journey and learn a lot as you go, rather than either have something done quickly or have it not quite right because you just couldn't stand to work on it anymore. Just enjoy the process, as they say. It's more about the journey. That's a bunch of crap. But anyway, I'm always living in the past or the future, so I just, but it's true. I mean, you should enjoy the journey and all that. I just don't normally. Okay, this is another little trick I developed. I'm not sure if other people use it, but I'll take little balls. You know, you get your shapes and everything, but flesh, you know, actually, especially if it's not doing well, it gets a little, you know, the planes aren't always smooth. So I'll just kind of randomly put different size. And you'll barely notice this, actually. Now, some of them you could leave, and it's, you know, like a wart or something, leave big, but a lot of them, I'll just put them on and give it surface irregularity, and then I'll come back in my next technique that I think I developed, but who knows? There's a lot of sculptors out there. It works for me, and it is to wet the sculpture down and move it around with sponges, and that seems to work pretty well to get a real organic feel quickly. I'm just putting these little lumps of clay everywhere, and like I say, a lot of it, you just won't see much of it once I'm done, but it seems to help, and it doesn't take long. So I'm using a rake right now. These are fairly stiff. These are lighter, and I'm just bringing in some aging and wrinkling. You can actually use these to smooth with. You know, you go this way and that way and so forth. Right now, I'm just adding fine lines with it. It's a great tool. So I just did some housekeeping, got the little white dried clay off. As you hit it with the dryer, all the little flakes come off, and you can dry them and knock them off with a paintbrush, or I was using a little rake, and also adding some lines. Now, I like to take the palms of my hands and fingers and get some smooth areas where the bone is and the skin stretching, it would be smooth along the edge. So it breaks up having the skin look all the same. And so, but also it makes sense that it would be stretched and wouldn't be as wrinkly in certain areas. Okay, so that's it. Now we're gonna paint this with the Krylon Leather Brown gloss and let that dry maybe overnight, and then we'll make a mold. We're gonna spend a little more time on the mold because some people are having trouble with molds, and man, you don't want to spend all this time sculpting and then have it ruined. So we're gonna go over that next. Then we're gonna pour it, pull it, cut it, paint it, and the final episode, so there's a 4-episode situation. The final episode, we're gonna show you how to make a zombie costume. So when you're done, you'll know it all. So if you like these sorts of videos, please subscribe, comment, but only if it's nice. And no, that's it. Say whatever you want, I don't care. However, I'll come as this guy to your house late at night if you say something nasty. That's it, guys. Talk to you soon. We're going to show you how to make a plaster mold of this creature. Now, this is something we sculpted in the last episode, and it's all sculpted in wet clay, and it's for a full-body zombie. But now we've got to make the mold, and I've put this on the stand. I'm going to take it off the stand and lay it flat so that I can work and have gravity be my friend. So I've just put this on with screws in the front. So what you'll need for this is Krylon spray. You want to spray it with Krylon. Now Krylon Leather Brown works really well for us, and it's gloss. Krylon Leather Brown gloss. And I put several coats on this, and the important thing is you let it dry thoroughly. It probably should just wait till overnight. If you go too fast in the molding, the paint will actually stick to the plaster, and then the latex will not absorb there. So it's really important that now what I did is I painted it several layers, then I put a fan on it for like 4 hours. And so it should be dry enough to not stick. But if you can leave it overnight, just leave it overnight and come back to it. It won't dry, you don't have to bag it now. Once you put this paint on, it's a good seal. So I'm gonna mix the plaster. All you need for this is really 1 or 2 chip brushes. These are throwaway chip brushes you can get at a paint store, and that just helps it get in the cracks. And you'll notice that I'll stroke both directions as I work to make sure that there's no air bubbles. And so now we're gonna mix the plaster. So the plaster we use at Distortions is USG #1 pottery plaster. Now there's lots of different options. We've found that for bang for the buck and ease of using, how it thickens up as you work, we like this. So I would recommend using that. And then if you want to get into UltraCal 30 and different things, there's different plasters have different strengths and weaknesses. This works for us. We've been using it for 40 years. Okay, so basically, what you're going to do is get water in a bucket. Now, I've kind of put in about 4 inches, I suppose, into this. And I'm looking at that and I'm saying, would that cover the mask with a thickness of 1.5 inches, 2 inches? And so that's what I'm guesstimating I need. And then I'm just going to start putting plaster and sifting it through my fingers as I fill this up. And your mass will go up some, but not tons. It's not like you say, well, I'm going to put all this plaster in, I'll have twice as much. It doesn't quite work that way. Most of the water is absorbed into the plaster. So let's get started. Now, the technique that I was shown by USG was you just kind of sift it through your fingers. Now, you can weigh this according to specs, and that's fine, and probably better, but you've got to have scales and things and make sure you've got your proportions right for whatever size mold you are. It's just a little more complicated, and this really works well to get a good thickness of plaster, and it can vary. It's not like it's magic. The 70-30 ratio is magic. I'll actually, if I'm doing a mold where I've had to do multiple layers, I'll actually go way off ratio and make it real thick for a final layer or something, because you're basically just building strength at that point. But staying close to their formula is going to be best, because it'll give you the best mold that will absorb the latex if it's mixed properly. And what I'm doing is I'm just getting the plaster in there, I'm shifting it, going across the top surface of the water, and I've got to get quite a bit of plaster in here to soak up this water. And ultimately, toward the end, when you know you've put enough in, is it will start to form islands over the surface of the water. And you can kind of slow down and wait for it to sink and things. Of course, the plaster I'm putting in now is slowly absorbing water. And if you're sifting it through your fingers like this, it'll help it from being clumpy. Because a clump, if you have bunches of clumps in there, you may be making it too thick because the water can't get to it. So then when you mix it, you got all this dry plaster that wasn't reacting to the water. You know, I'm going to have to eat my words a little here. The plaster is adding volume. I'm probably going to end up with more plaster than I really needed. I'm probably up to 6 inches now, so I've added a couple inches, and I'm not anywhere near saturation yet. And filling as we go. So I'm going to wait here a second. I like to kind of see it have islands over the whole surface. I think that gives you maybe a little bit thicker mix, but on something like this, that's okay, because it's not going to take a long time to make the mold. All right, so I'm probably good here. So that's what you're looking for. You want to see that kind of islands. It's like a little map of some Arctic world you made for yourself, but that's what you want to see before you start mixing it. And so when I mix it, I'm going to be doing this. I'm going to squeeze and break up any clumps that are in there. Now, you can wear gloves, but if you wear gloves, you need some pretty long ones. But I don't mind. I just wash my hands afterwards, and it's fine. But a lot of people like to wear gloves. But anyway, so I'm circling and just. A lot of these details, they're small, but they can make a difference. Another thing I'm not sure that I mentioned is the water should be tempered. It shouldn't be real hot or super cold. You should, like in the winter, you may have to add a little warm water, but it shouldn't be warm at all. It should be a little cool to the touch, which is pretty much like room temperature. Now, because I put this in carefully, I'm not feeling any lumps. So this is a good batch. And I'm still squeezing just in case, but I'm not feeling lumps. So now this is ready to put on the mask. Now one thing you want to do is have a bucket of water, because when you clean your hands, you do not want to be cleaning them in the sink. And it's like serious roto-rooter time. Okay, so I am gonna like paint east and west, north and south, to try to make sure, and then try to get up under this ledge. You know how I had this ledge built so it rolls into your eye socket instead of just cut latex. And there'll come a point, you'll get this on, and there'll come a point when you're not doing any good. You know, it's not setting up fast enough. The set time is very good on this stuff, but you know, when you're doing something small, you'll have extra time. When you're doing something big, you gotta rock and roll. So it's kind of splits the difference and works well. And it's critically important that you go back and revisit areas where there's, you know, pores and things that the plaster may not get in, or wrinkles or deep spots. You got to really poke and stuff. But you don't want to go crazy and like get hit it with the hard part of the brush. You know, you make sure it's just the bristles. Another thing you can do is get a handful and kind of pour it on at times. And you also want to get some on the board. I mean, the goal is to get an inch to 2 inch fairly even mold. You'll never get it perfect, but as close as you can. So now I've got a good amount of plaster over the whole thing. I'm going to come back and do that again. I'm going to try to just double check and make sure that I haven't missed anything. This is the way we do it, but you might watch some other people, they do it a little different. You might like their way better than our way. This just works, you know, it works for us. And you'll find with a lot of these special effects guys, makeup guys, whatever, that once they get something that works, they don't like to mess around. It's like, I'm sticking with that because I've had too many failures. So we've kind of found a way of doing it that works well. And you know, when you're making thousands and thousands of pieces, it's nice to not be reinventing the wheel every time. Start a new product. And sometimes Marcia said, well, we ought to try this new material and we should do it. And I'm like, no, this is too important. We got time to have problems. Now, as the plaster thickens up, you can take some of the plaster that's down here and drag it up. And especially like there's a little bit of cheekbone here. I want to make sure I'm getting under that cheekbone. And you just drag it up. Just like that. So I'm actually being a little bit dainty here. And so much of monster making is not dainty. Now that's my sculpture there. I'm trying not to disrupt the plaster underneath. Again, it's not terrible if you do, but I'm trying to just add thickness, which is essentially strength. Now, there are professional mold makers that they can get that mold like 1 inch thick all the way around, and it's beautiful, and that's all they do for a living. But there is something to be said for having a thicker mold. Number one, like this mold, I'm not going to use hemp. It's a small mold and it's pretty stout, and I just don't really need to use it. It's just another step when you're doing something this size you don't need to worry about. if you have hemp, use it. But I didn't want to bother with it this time because it's just not necessary. And one of the benefits of a thicker mold is actually it can handle more repetition of pores because it's of pores of latex, because the latex absorbs into the plaster. And so if you got a big old mold, you don't have to wait for it to dry all the way to the edge. There's plenty of suction power in the porousness of the plaster. And so even though you could look at it in some ways and say, well, it's kind of wasteful and gee, it's kind of heavy, it's kind of nice to have big beefy molds within reason. We've gone over the top. We've had molds that we literally had to have car tires and a forklift to move the molds to separate them. When we did the Alien from the movie Alien, that mold was so big, and it was a two-piece mold, the whole thing, and we would fill it up. I forget how we even filled it up, but we'd fill that thing up and then seal it, and then have to get the forklift and chains and pull the molds apart. It was quite an ordeal, but you know, plaster, it's a wonderful thing. You just pay the price sometimes. And there are lots of different mediums. I mean, not just different plasters. You could make a plastic mold off of this thing. I wouldn't recommend that early on. There's one of the beauties of plaster is it absorbs the latex and builds your thickness without having to do layers. Now, if you go to fiberglass, and we do sometimes when we get into big molds, we'll go to fiberglass. When you go to fiberglass, then you have to build it up with layers, and you will have to spray many layers to get the thickness we need. Okay, so this is now troweling density, and I'm just trying to get it so it's a fairly uniform thickness. I'm sure I've got a couple of inches of plaster all the way around. We've had big old molds sometimes, and it's like the tip of the nose, it's 1/8 inch thick. I mean, you gotta kind of pay attention as you're working to make sure that you're not ending up with 4-inch thick areas and 1/8 inch thick areas. Okay, so I'm going to let this get a little thicker. The last thing I like to do is to get a flat surface here so that when you flip it over for pouring the latex, it'll sit. And what I need is a stick. Let me see if I can find something. Okay, so I've got a flat edge, and you want to take it when it's really nice and thick and work it in. And it does not need to be pretty on the outside. It can be whatever. It's what's on the inside that counts. In life too. I hear butterflies. No, you can't hear butterflies. I hear birds chirping. Another thing I'll mention, playing with this stuff, is smooth it and get it as smooth as you can. You can take tools if you're really like an engineer or something and you like that mold to be really crisp and things. But what you don't want to do is come in with water. Now water, if I wet my hands with water as this is dry and I smooth it, man, that mold will look great. But you don't want to do that because that kind of seals off the pores so it doesn't breathe as well. And so you can scrape it, You can do what I'm doing now with just the plaster, but I wouldn't recommend putting water on the mold to make it look pretty. And that comes from Ken Snell. And Ken Snell was a mold maker. That's all he did for a living. And we hired him numerous times over our history. He's gone now, but he was a great guy, and he taught us a lot of this technique. And boy, I'll tell you, he was a tough guy from making molds all those years. In fact, he told me that a train car would come in, and that's back, I don't know if they even make 100-pound bags still, probably. We buy them in 50s just because of, you know, we're wimps. But they would unload a train car by hand, the whole car, him and another guy. It's like, dang, we're soft now. But anyway, that's where a lot of this comes from. And a lot of it's out there. You can find mold making videos online and stuff. I try to keep it as simple as possible so that it's not overwhelming, because when you start something like this, it can be overwhelming. Now, I will say this, for whatever reason, the plaster has given me lots of time to work today. That is not always the case. Sometimes you gotta get on it. So, you know, really stay with the mold. Don't like, oh, I think I'll go check messages on my phone and come back in 10 minutes. You could be very sorry. It's an organic product, and sometimes, you know, I'm sure sometimes it's the way you mix it, or the humidity in the air, or what, I don't know all the variables, but sometimes you got to really work fast, and sometimes not. Now, if you do all that stuff that I just did, you will have a very good mold. Let me wash my hands and I'll scrape this off. So I didn't find a paint stir stick, but this will work fine. It's just a piece of thick sheet metal. But just kind of go like this. You know, if I was really sharp, I could, you know, get a level and make sure it was just perfect. But, and like I say, if you want to clean up these edges a little, you can, but okay, so that is it. Now, we're going to let this set for maybe, you know, because it's already hard and it's starting to heat up, but I would give it maybe half an hour just to make sure that the plaster is firm, and then I'm going to show you how to clean the mold out and pour it with latex. Okay, so the mold is done, and I would wait about a half hour to make sure it'll get real hot and it'll start to cool down, and so you want to wait to make sure that mold's really set. And then I'm going to show you how to clean the clay out, and then how to fill it with latex, and we'll be right back. All right, so we're ready to remove this guy from the mold. And I just get a mallet or a hammer, flat screwdriver, and try to break the vacuum a little. Get some of this plaster off the side here. Once in a while, you're lucky and the sculpture just falls out. Okay, now don't lift this too high when you're doing that. So there's my armature. And now I'd like to get a big loop tool, something like this. You want to be careful not to scratch the surface, so pay attention. And then I like to get a chunk of clay and then pull. And that gives you the opportunity to kind of break the vacuum. But just, you know, kind of be aware of where your sculpture is, and so you're not doing any damage. And I'm also pulling up a little as I go, just because, you know, if I was right next to like a line that I wasn't aware of, I could break the plaster. So now I can just peel a lot of this out. I've gotten close enough that I can fold the clay and get it mostly out. And another tool you can use is something like this, little sculpting tool. You don't have to paint the mold, but I'll tell you, it just makes cleaning it so much easier that it's a step that we almost always do. If there's really a super deadline or something, we might skip it, but another tool that I don't need too much, but comes in handy, that I seem to have covered up, is a little wire tool like this. And it's got a little rounded area and point, and you can get into some of this fine detail. I don't know if you can see this, but like I'm working the nose, and so the rounded part helps keep me from doing damage. And I'm kind of doing that same little flicking motion, trying to break that vacuum, but now, that is it. So now you are ready to fill this mold, and this is a good solid mold. If you take care of this mold, it'll last forever. Maybe not forever, but 20, 30 years, you know. And now they do wear out when you pour them a lot. And so one of the things you might consider if you're wanting to do an army of zombies is to fill it with latex. Let the latex fill all the way around the outside edge, and then when that's dry, fill that with some sort of polyurethane, soft polyurethane foam, and then you can make all the molds you want, just over and over, forever and ever. In this episode of Monster Lab, we're going to show you how to cutting, painting, and then actually hairing and creating the costume so that you can turn yourself into an instant zombie. We're going to fill this with latex and let it set. We're going to fill it up to the top and just let it set. And as it sets, the plaster, which is porous, will suck the moisture out of that latex, and it'll build up a thickness of latex. So when we dump this out, depending on how long we let the latex set in there, it'll be thicker or thinner. So it's really a great process, very much like slip in pottery. So here we go. Okay, so now I'm going to take some good mass making latex and I'm going to just pick a spot to fill it and just kind of slow. It's not really critical. If you had crazy undercuts or something, you could brush it around if you felt like you had to, but normally you don't need to. And so now here's one of the things I think are a little confusing for people. When I started the business, I would like pour it in, dump it out, pour it in. That's how I built up my thickness. It was really, I didn't understand how it worked. But if you just let this set, and we're gonna let it set for maybe 15 minutes, and then dump out the excess, and we'll have a thickness that's enough for a face mask, but that varies. If you want a little thicker, let it sit 30 minutes. Let it sit an hour if you want it real thick, but just let it sit and it'll absorb the moisture in the latex that's sitting against the plaster. So we'll be right back. Okay, so the latex is set in the mold and built up that thickness, and so I'm gonna dump the excess latex back in because it's all good latex. And you can set it like on the bucket for, oh, I don't know, 10 minutes should be plenty. And then you after the latex has had a chance to drain down, then you'll just want to take it off and set it on the table. I'm going to just show you though how it looks in here. So it's just, there's just a skin of latex inside this mold that's fairly thin. You know, it's maybe a 1/16 of an inch or something like that, but it will cure. You just after it's drained completely, just set it and it will cure completely. And overnight, or if you put a fan on it, you could probably pull it in a few hours or something like that. But it's a very natural, easy process, and that is all there is to it. Okay, so I poured the first mask, which this one is going to be just a face mask, so it's a little thinner. So this one I left in the mold for about 45 minutes. So it's a fairly thick piece, and you just drain it like 10 minutes or something. Make sure it's done. Flip it over. You can, like this one, I just set on its side and blew a fan in it. But you just put a fan on it. You can use a hairdryer, but I caution you with this. I had the hairdryer way away from it, and I had the fan behind it. A lot of people think, oh, well, if a hairdryer helps, then a real hot hairdryer real close will help. No, you'll just melt the latex. So you can use a little bit of heat, but very cautiously. You don't want to burn your latex. It's not cooking, it's simply drying. So, you know, warm air dries faster than cool air. All right. So you just grab an edge anywhere you want and pull. And, you know, if it's fairly fresh, now this actually had a fan and a hairdryer on for a few hours, and it's fine, but it's not brutally strong like it would be if you had a fan on it overnight. But that is your little monster. And we're going to turn him in to a whole full body zombie, and so now it's time to head upstairs to paint. Now this mask, if you want to watch the episode, we showed you how to make it fit your face exactly, and this is designed to kind of hide the lines of the sculpture and where it's cut and things, so that it blends in immediately. And so we're going to cut these. And then it's better to cut the nose and the mouth from the inside. It's kind of this highest point is where the curve is the biggest. And you know, when you put it on, then you can judge. And I would figure this out before you paint it. Make sure that it's fitting and not poking or uncomfortable anywhere. Make that trimming before you paint it, because it's just easier and be more aggressive. Okay, so these two are ready to be based. I'm going to base these with a mixture that is covered in, I believe it's Monster Lab 1, but it's 1 part latex, mass making latex, 1 part indoor house paint, and then 1 part or a little less water. So now I'm going to base them with a flesh colored base and then highlight them with white. And you know, they could be a different color. The reason I'm choosing flesh is because I'm going to put this on. I don't want to have to wear gloves. I don't want to have to do eye makeup. I want it to just be an instant disguise. So the base starts by going up and then coming down. It's very easy. Now you can also do this with the airbrush. You know, if it's a small project like this, we just always use quart sprayers for basing. So now I'm going to spray on a little, kind of an off-white, and this just makes him a little pale and sickly. The other thing is, when you do a highlight, you really need to crank it so you're at a 90-degree angle, because if you do this, you're just erasing the flesh, you know. So we'll leave those dry for about an hour with a fan on them, and we'll be right back. All right, so the base coat is dry, and we're going to spray it with rubbing alcohol mixed with FW inks. Now there's other inks, I'm sure they work. FW is kind of like, seems like one of the best. And to make this, I'm going to give you the formula for what I do, and then you can kind of extrapolate depending on how much you want to mix. But this is 70%, that's important, 70% rubbing alcohol. You can get it anywhere. And for this color, I mix 4 bottles. Now these are the small size bottles. 4 bottles of antler brown, 3.5 bottles of flame red, and then 2.5 bottles of black. And that gives you a nice, rich, red brown, and that's enough rub-out ink to do probably hundreds of masks, depending on how heavy you put it on. But you can cut it down if you just want to do 1 bottle or whatever it is. So I'm going to do just like I did with the base, spray up, spray down, try to get it in all the cracks, and I'm going to shut the flow down a little bit. Now this can easily be put on by an airbrush. This is water consistency. So that kind of gives an overall darkness, and then I like to come in and shut it down even further and just go in and tighten up some of the predominant features, darken those up. So this dries pretty fast, and so you can get right on it with the rub out. And the rub out is just pure 70% rubbing alcohol. And get a sponge. Now this is actually a solvent resistant sponge. They work great, but any sponge really work, fairly soft sponge. And then you just lightly, you're not cleaning it off. This isn't wax on, wax off. This is just a light touch so that it takes off the rubbing alcohol on the top and leaves it in the cracks. And it's really, really fast and really good. We do most of our stuff this way nowadays. And if you don't have an airbrush, it doesn't matter. You just take paint brushes, use that same formula, 1/3 painting latex, mask making latex, 1/3 indoor house paint. That's kind of important because the outdoor stuff has extra chemicals to fight the sun. And then 1/3 water or a little less, depending on the thickness. Now, if you're brushing it on, you might want to just leave it without water. You just have to see, but that rubber will make it so that you can stretch these things. Get it all out. And you know, one thing I try to do every step is just kind of look at it. Make sure, did I get it all? You know, so stand back and say, oh no, I didn't get this. Just kind of, you know, hit it everywhere. Another little trick I do is to model it a little bit, even before stippling, is just to take, after you've rubbed it off. Now, if it's too dirty, if the sponge is too dirty, this doesn't work. But if it's not, you can just spread a little of that brown rub out. Now, this is brown. Sometimes I'll use maroon. It just depends on how rotten the character is supposed to be and so forth. But that is all there is to it. And it gives you this great look almost instantly. The next step is to put some translucent paint on, and we make this with FW inks, and then we mix, maybe, I think I'll go red first, half and half. So half FW ink, half 70% rubbing alcohol. That way it's not so nuclear. And also the rubbing alcohol, as you spray, is almost like you're a cleaner. You know, it helps keep it clean. So I'm just going to go in. Hit the lips. Maybe a little bit here. And then open it up. Just break it up a little bit and get a look here. This is subtle stuff. You just hit it fast and now, another thing I like to do is speckle. I'm going to go ahead and hit a speckle before I go to blue. There's 4 primary colors I use for speckling flesh. Now, this is not necessarily. It will look fine without this. This just adds that little bit of realism. And I put it in spray bottles. You can take like a chip brush, cut it in half, and just dip it in the solution and splatter it. And this is like, I would say you're looking at maybe 10 dropperfuls of the small bottles, FW, 10 of those for one of these. Now it varies depending on what it is, and if you can see it, it just gives you some spotting. And because skin is not one color. And And poster paint is one color. Skin is, man, there's all sorts of colors in skin, very subtle, but this just helps with the realism. I'm gonna add a little blue. This is blue translucent again, half FW, and I think this is called Roundy Blue, and it's half blue, half rubbing alcohol, 70%. Now there's a little trick. Let's say something horrible happened and you're like, you're painting and somebody goes, phone call, and you go, oh, I messed it up. Well, not really. The great thing about working with rubbing alcohol is you can go back in here and just make that all go away. Now, it doesn't mean the mask is fragile because you would have to destroy it with rubbing alcohol. But there's a trick to that too, and I'll show you that in a minute. I'll tell you about it now. We'll spray it on last. It's Krylon flat, like a fixative spray that they spray on paintings and things. It's in a spray can, and you just spray that on after you're all done, except for gloss. And you spray that on, and then that's locked under there. When you like the look of it, the other thing that helps with is if you're sweating and stuff, it helps protect the paint and even protects it from the elements somewhat. So I'm going to spray a little more brown on there because I made my speckles go away. Alrighty. Then, let's see, did I get blue? No, I only got blue on one of them. So I'm going to get the blue on this guy. And a lot of this stuff is pretty subtle, but all together it starts to look alive. Another color we use a lot is this reddish color, and this is accomplished, I think it's 1 quart rubbing alcohol, and then I think it's 8 dropperfuls of red FW, and then 1 black, and that gives you a little bit of a kind of a liver color. And all this stuff can be adjusted to your taste. And again, this part, the speckling part, don't feel like you need to do that because it's a lot of extra work, and really it's going to look very, very good without it. It's just that sometimes, we go in for that little touch of reality. Also, you should let them dry a little bit between each coat because they just start to run and blend together, and instead of getting that mottled look. This is blue. Again, probably something like 8 drops per, but nothing else, just blue per quart of rubbing alcohol. Now this one really models them nice. This is FW white, and I think this is something like 20, I think it's 22 dropperfuls of white, and then 1.5 of the brilliant yellow, and that'll give you kind of a nice yellowy white. Now what I was doing there, I was spraying, because sometimes the white builds up at the bottom, the pigment and titanium, and so it's heavier and builds up at the bottom. You start spraying it, it's like nuclear white. You don't want that, but you can test these things a little too, make sure they're looking good. Okay, so Now, I'm going to let that dry just a bit, and I'm going to spray the Krylon matte clear, and that will protect our work, and then we'll get a little gloss on the lips, and I'll be right back. Okay, so this is the Krylon matte finish. They also have a matte UV finish, but it's clear, and it's used for artist stuff. It's very good stuff. And one thing, sometimes I'll notice people just give it a couple shakes, they start, no. I would shake it pretty good for 30 seconds to a minute and then roll it. And maybe do that back and forth. Make sure you really got it mixed up. All right, so now these are protected and they are done. The last thing is to just put some gloss on the lips, and I like this Liquitex, and this is called Gloss Medium and Varnish. Liquitex Professional. Works great. It's got a little bit of elasticity to it, and it's not as shiny as epoxy, which you don't want. You know, when you're doing eyes, you want epoxy because they're actually wet. They're like with water. This is just a little bit of moisture around your lips just to give it a feel. And sometimes you might want to put a little in the nose because, you know, he's a zombie. All right, so when we come back, I'm going to show you how to hair these to hide your seam lines. And this is something that works probably better for guys because of the beards, but like if you were a wolf creature, this is not just only zombies. This could apply for any kind of a mask. But anytime you can hide seam lines and things with hair, you don't have to though, because I've exaggerated this nasolabial fold, and I'll show you how we're gonna make this thing so it can talk and even be eliminated. Take your pick, but the hair can be added to help hide those seams. So we'll go into that in just a minute, and we'll see you then. Okay, next we're gonna put on hair. Now, this guy, because we have these extended nasolabial folds, I'm gonna cut the mask there and around here so it'll grab my chin, and then I'm gonna attach it with elastic bands so that this becomes separate from the mask, and I'll hook it to my ears with elastic, and that way he can talk. However, with this same technique, you could just cut the jaw away and cut down here and just slip it on with Velcro. I'm going to show you how to do that. And then just your mouth is totally free to talk. It fits your face and you just talk and you're fine. You could put the mustache on. That's all depends on what you want to do. This one I'm going to leave big, and I'm also going to cut this down and so that it's just a face mask. This one I'm going to leave the whole half mask, and I'm going to give him a full beard, eyebrows, hair, so that you just slip this on, attach the Velcro, and you know you've instantly got a hairdo. Now, in case you wanted to like talk without this, I'm going to try to match the hair to my beard so that I could just have this, you know, because if like you're drinking and stuff, a mask can get pretty irritating. So you can go to, these come from like beauty supply places. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm like a sophisticated salt and pepper. And what I discovered when I looked in the mirror is I'm more of a Santa Claus kind of look.
Why, they can go so fast, we can fly through the air.
So I got this, but I'm not quite there yet. So I'm going to try to blend these a little, try to make it look a little bit like me, but you can do the same thing. You can go, they've got browns and blacks and every color you can imagine. And the stuff's fairly inexpensive. So I'm going to start laying it on. Now I'm going to go a little long, and then when the silicone's dry, I'm going to start trimming. Now that's the next thing I want to talk about, silicone. This is 100% pure silicone, and it's clear. That's very important. 100% clear, 100% silicone, clear. And you can buy it in smaller tubes and things. You don't have to get in a big thing like this. But that you need to do. And then you just put it on. I'll start with this guy. We'll get him out of the way. You just put a bead on. And I'm going to go down here a little to make sure that hair stays where it's supposed to. Okay, so I'm going to start with a white, unfortunately. I used to be a young monster maker and all that stuff, and just as the years have gone on, I started to look more and more like my monsters. Okay, so I think I'll start with white, and I'll kind of do the blending on the mask, and I'm going to go longer than I need to, just because it's easy to trim and hard to add. So you lay this in, and I've cut it at a little bit of an angle, and I'm going to push it right into that silicone. And you got to push pretty hard and work it toward the edge. And I've got this silicone running down the side, so I'm going to want to push it into that. And this is just a paint stirring stick, you get when you buy paint. Comes in very handy. Do the other side. And I'm not putting on tons of hair. Obviously you want to put on enough, but you don't want to get it so thick that you're not getting it stuck down, and then you kind of don't know what you've got. Some will fall off, certainly, when you're brushing it and things. Now, here's another thing for your consideration. There's many different ways to glue this on. There's Mod Podge you can get in a craft store. There's latex itself. You can get thick latex and stick it on with latex. The reason I like the silicone is because it's so thick and sticky that you can move the thing around, and it will stay good enough until it's dry. And when it's dry, it's on there like a rock. I mean, that's rock. I don't know if that's it, but it's on there really, really tough, and it will stay. And you can comb it, and you can take a lot of abuse. Silicone is pretty darn good. But again, there's many different ways to do it. Now, I want to give him some little eyebrows. Not a lot of silicone on there, just enough to do the job. Now these I don't want to get too long, because they've got to kind of stick up. And get your hand behind it and really make sure that that's stuck in, and kind of style it a little bit while you're there, because you can angle where you want the eyebrows to go while the silicone's wet, and it will. I wonder if I want those down. He seems a little sad, but that's all right. He's not doing too well. And this, the other good thing about this, it's called braid. This stuff's called jumbo braid. There's different brands and things, but what's nice about it is it's light, and it looks pretty real. And so you can stick it in. It grabs the glue. You could do this with just you could cut up an old wig and use that hair. it's not going to be quite as easy to deal with. Another thought, and this is like if you're getting a major haircut, you might want to save the hair and put it on here, because then it'll match for at least 5 years. That gold ain't gonna mine itself. All right, so now I'm gonna come back with a little bit of this gray and try to simulate where I'm at in the scheme of things. It's not too bad. Now you could blend this before you put it on, and that's fine too. And another thing to do, if you got too much, if you put it on this way, where it's kind of over, and you got too much, then you can kind of lift and thin the color on top. I'm going to put just a teeny bit in the eyebrows. All right, so we'll leave him sit and wait for his haircut. This guy we're going to do very similar, except he's going to get a full hairdo. Now, I like to do the low stuff first because the high stuff gets in your way. So we're going to start putting on the hair. Let's see now. How much of a beard do we want on this guy? Well, I'll just make it a little extra long and we'll figure that out as we go. And you kind of layer this on. So you're not counting on just one single row. And also you want to kind of glue it on the direction the hair grows. Trying to spread it out a little so that it can all hit the glue. And a towel is good to periodically clean up your stick. Okay, so the hair is all on, but it's still a little wet. I'm gonna put a fan on it to dry it out so we can style it a little bit. The funny thing is, as I was going along, it's like, okay, I wanted to blend with my beard and stuff, and then I thought, well, I should make the hair go back so that it blends in with my hair. And then as I got toward the end, I realized I had just haired myself. I mean, this looks like me, give or take 20 years. Isn't that weird? Anyway, we'll be right back. Okay, it's time for haircuts. Now for this, you're just gonna need a brush like this with kind of soft, spread apart bristles. And don't go too crazy, but just kind of comb it. Sometimes stuff will pull out. I mean, some's gonna pull out no matter what, but I mean, sometimes you get a big chunk come out and you won't like that, and you can put it back in, but the idea is to get all the excess off right now before you start trimming. And I am penetrating through the layers here. Okay, so we're going to first get the shape we want of the beard. And try to get it fairly level. Now, since you don't have as much hair as you'd have like on a person, you just kind of pick up little pieces and cut them at an angle up. And then when they go down, they're kind of not all the same length. So you just go around it, do that, and you can play with this quite a while till you get what you want. And then the next thing is to come up here and just, it's like you're cutting in the same direction of the hair, which is kind of weird, but it actually gives it that tapered, grown out look. Now the eyebrows I'm gonna leave a little long on the ends. You know, the hair, it really makes a difference. Like this could be a wizard. You know, if you had real long eyebrows and a real long beard and. Now the idea of this back here is to blend into my hair. Now if you wanted to be some kind of creature with blue hair or something like this, well then you just make this real long so it covered your hair completely. But I was trying to go for light and comfortable and just kind of an instant disguise so that I didn't have to put on makeup and go through a whole bunch of hoopla. I could just, you know, slip it on quick. Okay, so that's that. This guy, we'll give him a quick eyebrow trim. That is that. Now, let me just show you one more thing before we take these down that I find very helpful. Take that same flat Krylon. You can use gloss Krylon too if you really need stronger hold. The gloss works a little better. But just spray it down, and then you can kind of style it a little bit. Now, then once you get it pretty much where you want it, give it another coat. Okay, so this guy, I want to have like just a face mask. Now I'm gonna guess, but when you do this, I would put it on your face and in front of a mirror and fold it down and find out exactly where your hairline is. And that's gonna give you, you know, and then you can kind of comb your hair over the edges and hide that seam a little bit. So I'm gonna get a rough idea. I guess it's right about there. Like I say, this is some wild guessing here. This, you know, you should take time and try to get this right. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is cut those nasolabial folds and then the goal is to remove this completely. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to see what this looks like. The idea here was to kind of hide that nasolabial fold, and I'm not going to have complete success because I've got more of my beard, but the idea is that you could go to a party like this and just talk and eat and drink and so forth. Now, inside this mask, I'm going to put tabs. This stuff, now just so you notice, this sticks very well to the rubber though, so you may not need it. But for extra strength, you just put the contact cement on it. You have to let it dry totally and completely, and then you stick this on. If you put it on wet, you're actually doing more harm than good. So you put these right around your eyes, and then get the opposite Velcro, the fuzzy, and stick a piece on here, and then you'll need to put a piece on here, and then leave a little bit like that. This is the prickly Velcro that I've stuck on the mask. This is the fuzzy Velcro that I've stuck on the prickly Velcro. And then you get some prickly Velcro. Oh, also, I didn't mention this. This is Velcro that has an adhesive backing. And you can get these at fabric shops, Home Depot, but you need that to stick to the mask. This stuff has nothing. And again, fabric stores, anywhere like that. So you put this fuzzy, and or I should say this prickly stuff, on the fuzzy, and then over here, and give yourself some latitude. Because, you know, after you make this mask, you're going to be so proud, your head will be big, you'll have to expand the Velcro.
Great. So now you've got the big head.
Look who's talking. All right. So you put this on, and then do this. And then, now, see how that fits around my eyes just right, and my lip fits right in there? So you can talk and things, but this is more like if you didn't have a beard, what this mustache hides that separation between the mask and you. And so that's how that works. So let's get the other one. It's a little different vibe. We are going to do the same thing with the sticky back Velcro. I'm going to just cut a couple pieces here. And when you stick them, make sure that you really push down and make a bond with the latex. And it's a really good bond. This stuff's got some super adhesive. Okay. So see where I placed that right by the eyes? That's where you want it. And same trick, take your fuzzy Velcro and hook it on, leave a little slack, take a shorter piece, hook that on, and then hook your prickly Velcro onto that. And that way these two can line up as need be. I've got way more Velcro than I need. But again, you're better to put too much on and trim a little off than not have enough and have to waste a whole nother piece. So that's what you end up with to lock it onto your head. Same deal, we're going to cut the nasolabial folds. Here's what I want. This is just elastic, black elastic you can get at a fabric store. And the idea is to wrap it around your ear and connect to this jaw piece. And so I'm gonna guess that's about the right length. We'll see. I'm sure I'll probably have to make some adjustments. Now I would put the smooth side of the staple up on the inside of the mask. Let's see how that's going to fit. You know, this is actually the first time I've ever done this. I'm serious. But in my mind, it works perfectly. Okay. Now, I more than likely have to do some adjustments, but all right. So, let's see, what else do I have to do? I think that's it. Okay, so I put this on for now, but before I put that on, this was kind of designed to match my hair so that if I didn't want to go that far, I could go like this. Now, I have no idea if that looks good or not, but you know, I can eat and drink and talk and hopefully it's a fairly good match. Is it fairly good, Adam? Tom, is this good?
Looks good to me.
It is, but the hair is just so wild.
Pooping a little.
Okay, so this is one way to wear the mask so that it kind of blends in with you. Now, I wish I had a mirror, but if you did, you could, you know, change things and add a little more of a different color or whatever you need to. But then for the ultimate look, you put on this bad boy. That's the gang. How do I look? Brains. Brains. Subscribe or die! Press like too.